Hi, everyone. So this episode is going to be about, I think, two things: reinventing yourself and also 75 hard, kind of related in a way, kind of not. Basically, I'm doing 75 hard at the minute, and with that, obviously, becomes a change in habits or a change in behavior. And I'm on day 45 or something, so I'm 2 months in almost. No, I'm not. That's a lie. I'm 6 weeks in. And I'm at the point now where it's just my routine. It's just become part of my day-to-day life to do these things now. And I'm also at the part where I can't, be asked sometimes. I feel like the first, 2-3 weeks I was yeah, I'm going to really do these things and whatever. Whereas the past few days, I've really just been I can't be asked to do it. I can't be bothered. I don't care and I don't want to do it. Obviously, understandable. I'm also sick right now, if you could tell by my voice. So that kind of also is factoring into it in terms of the lethargy element. But the main thing that this has got me thinking about is how my mindset has changed, specifically regarding things that I used to deem as fun, right? And then this has kind of snowballed into this bigger mental picture of things that I used to deem as fun 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was. And then I start thinking about all the different life stages I've been in, or all the different friends I've had, all the different activities I've done, or what I used to do on the weekend when I was this age compared to this age. And, all these different cycles of my life that I've been through. And, at what point I phased out of them and why I phased out of them. And I think, I was going to say we can all agree, you all know me really well, but I can definitely coin that the biggest, change of me so far was when I left the rave scene. Because obviously I grew up kind of in and around drum and bass. I think the first time I heard any kind of drum and bass was in year 7 on the bus. So I was 11 years old. And it was always something that was played at school, at house parties. If I went into town, my local town was Bristol. So if I went into town, there was always some kids with a speaker playing drum and bass. And it was always just a big part of my scene, right? And then obviously the older I got, I started going to illegal raves and underground raves and warehouse raves and the ones that are really scatty and sketchy and the police break up and the proper weird ones. And then obviously when I turned 18, it was legal raves, and then I started getting more into the other side of it, the artistry side of it. I made the cardinal error of dating a DJ, and I used to interview artists, and I actually still have a lot of great relationships from that era of my life. But so I was super integrated into this subculture. And for anyone that is involved in a subculture or interested in a subculture or anything to do with any kind of subculture, you will understand how you tie yourself to elements of this subculture to validate your ego, or elements of your ego. And you believe that you are part of something. You feel like you belong to something. And even when I listen to my old podcast that I made during this time, I can hear how strongly I believed that this community made me feel like I fit in. And I think that's why a lot of people find that in whatever the subculture is. I don't know what other subcultures people that are listening to this are like into. But obviously I'm not in that subculture. So, and that is kind of not really relevant. Like, the reasons that I left that subculture aren't relevant to this episode. I have other episodes about that, 2022-ish, 2023, if you want to listen. That's when that content was released. But when I left that subculture, I had a fucking identity crisis, right? Because I realised that so many elements of my identity were tied to this subculture. And a big part of this subculture as well was smoking weed, right? For me, it was like that was also they kind of went hand in hand, right? And I was like a huge stoner at this time. So they kind of stopped at the same time, when I stopped smoking weed and when I stopped like being so actively involved in drum and bass. And I have an episode on why I stopped smoking weed. So again, like, I'm not here to like rehash all my previous points, but I remember when I stopped doing both of these things, you know, I saw this TikTok once and it said that most addicts relapse when they come out of rehab, because if you could imagine a pie chart, 90% of their life is taken up by that drug. So the friends they have do that drug, or the things they wear, they choose to wear those things while they do that drug, or things in their room are related to doing that drug, or they have paraphernalia related to that drug, or they've invested money into that drug, or experiences into that drug. And it was kind of the same for me with drum and bass and smoking weed, right? Like, you know, all my clothes were rave clothes. Like, I had like this crazy assortment of bongs for some reason. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Everything was tied to rave culture. And obviously when I then left that subculture, all the clothes that I was wearing, they didn't feel right anymore. And all the friends that I used to hang around with, they didn't feel right anymore, because they would smoke and I wouldn't smoke, or they'd want to go to raves and I was like, I kind of can't be arsed. Like, or, you know, even the music that I chose to listen to didn't fit anymore, because I was like, I don't want to listen to Liquid, I don't want to listen to Jungle, I don't want to, like, especially because the reasons in which I chose to leave drum and bass were like quite emotionally tied for me. It was, you know what it's like listening to music, a specific type of music that evokes memories for you. It's like hard. So it was weird. I had this complete identity crisis where I was like, I dress for this subculture, I behave for this subculture, my podcasts even at this point are for the subculture, my community is for the subculture. You know, everything that I do externally and like egoically, right, is for this subculture. The only thing separate at that time that wasn't tied to that subculture was my spirituality, which has always been something very independent. And that's always something that I'm glad to have, because I feel like that's kind of my anchor, right? So no matter if I have nothing in the world, I always have my faith, which has been a real solace for me, I guess. So anyway, I leave this subculture and I kind of start exploring new things. So if anyone has ever stopped smoking weed, one thing you'll realize is you suddenly have way more money because you're not spending it all on weed. And so I went on a holiday with my best friend Joe, and I started buying new clothes and I started listening to new music, and I found out that I really like old music, like 50s, 60s, 70s, like old music. And you know, I started really getting into like decor and really getting into art and really getting into fashion beyond just the realms of rave clothes, right? And there was this like 6-month period of just like complete self-discovery. I also met my ex-boyfriend around this time, which was actually very helpful because I feel like that really enabled me to bridge the gap between who I was and who I was trying to be, or who I used to be and who I was becoming. And with that came the ability to meet new people, or, it's like when you meet a new person and they don't have this expectation of you, of who they think you are, or they might, but it's like a blank slate, So it was really helpful, and this period was really transformative. And then, so this was maybe like 3 years ago, right? 2 or 3 years ago. And I feel like since then, I've just gone through this constant process of reinvention, right? Like, and I don't know if this is tied to just like me finding myself, or me like growing up, or me having different goals, but I feel like I can pretty much tie each era of my life to a specific like niche or a specific aesthetic. And I don't really fuck with the term aesthetic because I think it's pretty I'm trying to think of the word, like limiting. Like, I think it's a good way for someone to put you in a box, and I don't really fuck with that. But I do feel like I can tie each of those eras to a certain identity, right? And I've lived in Australia now for like 3 months. So I am now at the point where, obviously, when you move here, you can't really take anything from home. Like, you can take clothes and kind of a bit of stuff, but pretty much everything else you have to get from scratch. So I've kind of been formulating this new identity. What do I choose to put in my room? What do I choose to buy? Like, certain kind of, it's like going to uni and being able to like do your room and whatever, but it's also like that on crack, because the shops don't have the same things as back home. You can't bring anything from home here, or if you do, it's very limited, and everything is like upside down, like even down to the shampoos that you use. Like, and I know this, I sound like a fucking idiot, but it's like, you choose to buy a certain type of shampoo, whereas like back home I would just buy the same one that I always bought, whereas here it's like an active choice to choose something different for myself. And I have a lot of art in my room, and it's like, back home, the art that I had back home was so different to the art that I have here, and it's like, why is that? And it's just all of these things about like, why do I choose these things? And I know this sounds ridiculous, and I sound like I'm talking about a whole load of nothing, and I kind of am, but the point is I feel like I'm observing these like shifts in what I'm looking for or what I'm wanting. And I think a big part of that obviously comes down to growing up and aging and like just preference changes. But I also think a big part of that comes down to experiences, particularly like negative experiences. Like, what is the saying? There's that saying, and it's like, fuck knows, I don't know. In my mind, the saying goes something like, you have to do something wrong to know that you don't want to do it again. I don't know. There's definitely like some kind of saying that's similar to that. And for me, it kind of feels like that. Like, it's relevant, but it sounds stupid. When I first moved here, I was decided that I was going to be a white towel on white sheets girl. And I very quickly realised why that was a stupid decision. Because now all my towels are stained with black hair dye and sand marks from the beach. And it's like, I chose these things, but now I won't choose those same things going forward, because I had to do it, because it was always something I wanted to do, but never did, because I had stuff from home, so I didn't need to buy stuff like that, But it's like, now I've learned that is, I don't even know what I'm talking about, man. Like, I sound like I'm trying out my arse, and I honestly, quite frankly, am. But I feel like the main takeaway that I'm trying to make here is that I feel like a lot of evolution actually lies in our wrongdoings or our mistakes. And I feel like recently, specifically with 75 Hard, there's not really room for error, right? Like, if you don't do the tasks, you start again. So I feel like recently I've kind of been hard on myself. And I know that's the point. It's called 75 Hard for a reason. And I spoke to my mum the other day and I was like, I'm feeling really run down. I'm really ill. I, like, you know, don't know whether to like buy food now or get food in the morning, whatever. And she was like, oh, just do both. And I was like, but I couldn't possibly do that. And she was like, why are you being so hard on yourself? And she gave me this whole pep talk and she was like, you're being so hard on yourself that you're not enjoying what you're meant to be enjoying. All the things that you've set yourself up for here, you're not enjoying them because you're taking it too seriously. And that comes from obviously this feeling of lack of like times when I've like let myself down or whatever. And it's like the reclamation of control, which is obviously a good thing, but it's like taken to the extreme. And it kind of goes back to that point about the towels. And I don't know why I keep circling back to this, but it's like, I'm not beating myself up for the fact that I bought white towels because I always wanted white towels. But I just now wouldn't do that again. But I'm not coining it as a moral choice, like a morally bad choice that I made to buy white towels, even though it has had a negative effect on, like, it's annoying, right? It's not like overly negative, but it's like, it is frustrating when I look at my towels and they always look dirty because they're covered in black hair dye, even though I've washed them 3 times. Do you see what I mean? It's like, it can be perceived as bad, I guess, or like a bit of a jarring situation, but it's not morally wrong. And I feel like this is something that I'm slowly kind of starting to adjust to in my maybe like adult brain, is that a lot of the choices that I've made growing up I perceived to be morally wrong, but they weren't morally wrong. They were just like towel related instance, right? It was like you did something because you always wanted to do it, and then only afterwards did you realize that it was a bad idea. Like smoking weed, right? Like I always thought it was really cool, and then when I did it all the time I was like, oh, I actually like I'm a dumbass now and like have no determination or drive. And I'm also not saying that if you smoke weed that you're a dumbass that has no determination or drive. I just am a dumbass that has no determination or drive when I smoke weed. So it's like that's kind of where I'm at, is the white towel theory, right? And like I'm not coining this, and this is like not, I'm not trying to make this like a fucking TikTok theory, but that's kind of, I feel like where I'm at, and this theory is helping me find balance, because I feel like this is one thing that I struggle with, is like, you know, I'll really let my hair down and go crazy and be like, woo, like party girl, and then all this shame and guilt and feelings of worry about spending all this money and, you know, not being in my health and wellness era, whatever, then kind of forces me into this period of isolation, or this kind of hermit energy. If you read tarot, you know what I'm on about. Like this hermit vibe of like, I have to work and save and plan for my future and whatever. Like I sound like an OAP. Like I genuinely sound like an OAP. And I feel like one thing that I actually journaled about the other day was about how I find that there is a lot of guilt or like moral weight tied to everyday experiences, which wasn't there, you know, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I actually believe that a lot of this comes down to the fact that as a society, we view everything by the metric. You know, got to do 10,000 steps a day, got to do 2 45-minute workouts a day, got to drink 2 litres of water a day. Specifically, obviously, I'm talking about 75 hard. It's very metric based, which kind of doesn't help. And one of the rules that I actually changed in 75 hard was letting myself eat whatever I want, because I didn't want to demonize certain food groups, because I don't think that's good for my psyche, right? Because I have a very analytical mindset, and I think if I were to start to demonize certain food groups or count calories or things like that, it would become almost like an obsession, and I don't want to do that for myself, because I've always had a very healthy relationship with food. However, I feel like instead of doing it with food, I've kind of done it with everything else. Like, I've demonized everything else, specifically alcohol. And it's crazy, because I've never been a person that has an issue with alcohol. I've never been a real, honestly, like, big drinker. I'm really not, like, I don't know, like, I think in uni I had, like, in my first year of uni, I think I had, like, 2 beers. I didn't finish them. And it's weird. It's almost like this feeling of abstinence has led me to, like, demonize it, or be like, I can never do that again. And there's this element of fear that's surrounding it, and this feeling of like, well, if I just do all these things, then I'll be perfect. And then if I slip up, I'm a failure. And, like, this is where I kind of feel like 75 hard could have slightly damaging effects, is kind of because it's like the reinvention part of it is so real that it's kind of like, when you come out of it, like, what do you do on day 76? Do you carry on doing those things? Do you not? Do you whatever? Like, I don't know, you can do whatever you want. Do you go on a bender? Do you get the packet in? Like, do you know, I'm joking, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, what do you do? Because you've cultivated such a strict set of rules for yourself that then when you come out of it, that's your new norm. And then you then have to change your norm again to find this weird in-between balance. And it just feels like this constant cycle of, like, one extreme to the other. And it's just too much. I don't know. Maybe check back in 30 days and I will have the answer for you. For that, I'm going to leave now, because I think I've come out of this more confused than I went into it. But I love you all dearly, and thanks for listening. Appreciate it.